My name's Hugh. I'm a co-host on The Imperfects. I'm the son of Sri Lankan and English immigrants, and I call Australia home. We at The Imperfects acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is recorded, and we extend our respects to the elders past and present. I've spent much of the last decade travelling around this country sharing stories. In doing so, I acknowledge and pay homage to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's rich history of storytelling. I also acknowledge that whenever I talk about or practice resilience, there is no greater example than the one set by the world's oldest living culture.
The Imperfects is not a licensed mental health service and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, treatment or assessment. The advice given in this episode is general in nature, but if you're struggling, please see a healthcare professional or call Lifeline on 131114.
Quick! Is anyone here a doctor? Yes, her name is Dr. Emily, and she's a psychologist. Please welcome to The Imperfects, our very own psychologist!
Morning, Em.
Good morning.
Morning, Em.
Hi.
Hi. God, these are maybe some of my favourite episodes. Because I know for sure.
Maybe.
Well, because as I started the sentence, I was like, oh, this is going to be offensive to other episodes. So if I just sort of like drop a maybe in there, then everyone else will be like, oh, he did say maybe.
So instead it's just offensive to Em.
Yeah, exactly. Try to please everyone, you please no one. Am I right, Em? Truth versus harmony, right?
Em, welcome. It's
yes.
great to have you back.
Oh,
Again, in the studio, not in Perth. Perth's great, but it's lovely to
It's really
have you.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So great to be here.
And today, the topic today, well, do you want to, it's probably better if you introduce
Can we have a bit of like
just a
friendly chat with Em?
Oh, yeah, cool.
Because I had something I wanted to friendly
Friendly chat.
Is it Born Cinema?
No, it's not Born Cinema.
Oh,
Cool.
No.
Watch out.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that, Em.
This is weird. Okay.
Well, I just wanted Em to know that we've been doing our live show all over the country, and afterwards we chat with people, and so many people just want to talk about you.
Yeah.
That is very lovely and also very strange for me. Yeah.
No, but it's all, I always feel like they see us and go, the boys. No, Em's not here.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit disappointing for them, but then they'll recite like word for word parts of your episodes, and
Wow.
it's really cool.
That's, I continue to be so blown away, and it's just such a privilege to be able to share all this information and talk with you guys, really. So thanks for letting me know.
So professional.
So professional.
So professional. So good. So good. Do you want to keep friendly chatting, Hugh, or at what point do you want to?
Yeah, I would like to do some more friendly chatting.
Okay, great. Cool. I was trying to think of some things to chat about.
Have you been to... Actually, no, abort. This is the worst question I've ever asked
I
anyone.
really want to hear it.
On or off air, this is the worst question I've ever asked anyone.
What's it going to be? I'm trying to guess what your
what the question
gonna
could
be. It's
be.
going to be about a cafe, I reckon.
No, it's worse.
Okay.
Have you
That would not be too
been to the zoo? Have you been to the zoo?
Aquarium?
Elsie went to the zoo with Penny the other day, and Penny sent me a video of Elsie looking really confused, going, "But where are the unicorns?" And I heard Penny say, "I think they're at the Werribee Zoo."
Oh no! What a promise.
Anyway, no, my question was going to be, have you been to the grass ath track at UWA, University of Western Australia?
Oh my God.
I think we're done with small talk. We can get on to the episode.
Wow.
It's so beautiful. The grass
No,
is perfect.
I've really not been there.
Wow.
Blue
Sorry.
lanes, like not white, they're blue, and it's just, to die for him.
The track is grass.
The
I don't
track
know
is
why I'm
grass.
asking, but
Oh,
track is
I'll
grass.
show you all a photo later.
Yeah, it'd be good. We can share it on our socials.
Yes.
yeah.
Thrilling.
Well, this has been great. Hugh, well worth it. And exactly what people have tuned in for, I think. Oh, Dr. Emily, good. I hope they do some small talk at the start.
Namely about trucks.
Hugh, I don't want to jump in
Sorry,
if you still want to do more friendly chat.
No, I think
it.
I've really warmed everyone up here.
Yeah.
We're ready to go.
Well, scintillating stuff. Mark that for the promo, I reckon, definitely. Dr. M. Just provide a good edit point there for friendly chat. Dr. M, what are we talking about today?
I'd really love to talk about friendship.
Oh, I thought you were going to say friendly chat then.
It's very apt. So we were having friendly chats into the discussion on friendship.
Friendship,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. And I have to almost preface this by saying that there is so much to understanding friendship. And the interesting thing is that we so often relegate friendship in our attention over, I guess, looking at our romantic relationships. And if we look at a number of pieces of research that are done on romantic relationships, they really, the research on friendships really pales in comparison. It's really a lot smaller. But what I'm hoping is that in our discussion today is that we can really recognise just how integral and pivotal friendships are for our well-being and our physical health. And then have a look at, I guess how this, particularly how as adults we have friendships, sustain friendships, make new friendships, and then have a look at a bit of the research around perhaps some of the obstacles that get in the way.
This is great.
Them.
Incredible.
Excited.
Yeah, very excited.
Is it also looking at positive and friendships that are really good for us, also friendships that potentially are not as good for us? Is that part of it as well? Or?
Yeah, so I'll have a look at that. But I guess, again, just kind of managing expectations is that there are so many different aspects to this that we definitely can't cover in just one episode. So I'll try and get to the main things that feel important, I think. But there is so much more to this than just one kind of discussion on friendship, I think.
Well, do you want to start with friendship bracelets, or is that, should we... I feel like that is going to be a big part.
That seems like the peak.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're ascending to.
I don't know where you want to slot that in, but obviously it's going to be a big part of the friendship.
Do you want to
chat.
do the ones where you wear, it's you get half and the other person gets the other
Oh,
half?
those hearts.
which were extremely exclusive at primary school. If your friend had one with someone else, devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, this is your episode, of course, but then the other thing I think of friendship is the way that sort of friendships have kind of evolved in how we express friendships publicly, because it's friendship bracelets, I guess, when we were at school. But then in MySpace days, there was the top friends.
Yeah.
And so it's publicly you are making an announcement. These are my current top friends. And it was you had real power in those top friends. But anyway, it's interesting how
that's a really interesting note that I'll come back to actually in terms of how we understand the number of friends we have. But the reason I was kind of thinking about friendship was in part kind of reflecting upon the work that you guys are doing. But one of the things that stands out to me in listening to the three of you talk is how powerful friendship is. And I think in some ways that's what we can be really drawn into is hearing really healthy adult relationships. And then I got thinking about, how is this showing up in a lot of the episodes that we're hearing. And I went back to one of them that you did with Will McMahon probably a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, from Will and Woody. Yep.
Yeah. And
magnificent man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that episode, really showcased so many things, but one of them really was kind of the power of friendship and the importance of friendship for, for really our well-being, I think. And so I thought we might kind of start off with a little excerpt from there. Josh, if you're ready.
I was thinking today when you said, you wanted to talk about this stuff, about how mates can be and how friends can be around people who are suffering something, or even if it's not qualified as a mental illness or whatever, just if they're just having a shoe on. What role do you play as a friend? How do you play that role? And I think Woody does it incredibly well. He's the best example of how I see this play out with me when I look back on it. Certainly not when I'm in the midst of it. It's too hard to acknowledge. But when I look back on it, because I think there's two things that you shouldn't do when someone's in that sort of a position. And, talking to anyone listening now, if you've got a friend or anything like that who's going through something like this, one's apathy. So too hard, don't care, out of sight, out of mind. And one's despair. And both of them are destructive to the person who's suffering. And there's a middle point in there somewhere, which is softness and gentleness and kindness and calmness without slipping either side, which is, this is so upsetting for me, or I need to block this out because this is too hard for me. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be accessible to you all the time, and shit, don't judge yourself if you've fallen into either despair or apathy. God knows we've all done it. But for a friend, that sweet spot is a beautiful place to be. And I think he nails it a lot of the time. You know, he sort of just says to me, hey, mate, how you going? Can tell there's a lot going on. Mate, don't worry about it. If you need to go home, I'm here for you if you need me.
Yeah.
He's not digging any deeper, doesn't need to know the answer. It's just pure support. The strength is in the softness.
Yeah.
That's the real skill.
Yeah.
I reckon.
God, I love that line, the strength is in the softness. That's such a great line. Yeah.
I mean, such a powerful discussion, really. And to me, again, you know, the huge importance of that relationship to Will, to both of them. And, you know, again, this is really, I guess, where I wanted to showcase just how significant our friendships are in our lives.
It reminds me as well, we had 360 on the show, the rapper, a couple of months ago, and he...
my friend.
Yeah, your mate.
Your mate of mine.
Dope friend,
360.
You made some gallant attempts at getting on 360's level by using his language. Failed. You'll hear it when you listen to it. But
I just talked about my brother who's fresh.
All right, mate.
Still got it.
But 360, or Matt, his name is Matt, one of his close friends, Pez, who's another rapper as well, and the way that Matt talks about, 360 talks about how Pez supported him through his addiction, was so inspiring. It was just incredible. Anyway, it made me think of that as well.
And I think, again, you know, we just so often miss how significant those relationships are. So I wanted to kind of even begin just by having a look at how we understand how many kind of relationships the human brain can hold. And there's a really interesting evolutionary psychologist, researcher, Robin Dunbar, who in his work again and again came up with this particular number which tells us how many relationships the human brain is capable of sustaining at any one time.
Whoa.
And is this consistent for everyone's brain? This is...
Yeah, so this is the average, and I'll explain a little bit as to the kind of, if we look at like the bell curve, so there's always going to be individual differences in here. But there is a really high what's called retest reliability with this number. So that means that basically this number is repeated in different samples, in different populations, in different contexts again and again. And the number is 150.
Oh, that's much
bigger than I
higher.
expected.
I was expecting 4 or something.
Yeah. 6.
But I want to kind of break that down into what that really means. So if you imagine like you've got almost like an apple basket, I suppose, and you've got 150 people in this basket. So that is what we can actually hold in our awareness of the people we can have relationships with.
150.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But within that 150, there are like layers of closeness almost. And he describes it almost like concentric circles. So in the middle circle, we've got 1 to 2 people, so kind of like on average 1.5 people. And they would be like a really intimate person. And that can be a partner or a parent.
So this could be a romantic partner.
It could be.
Or a parent.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
But we've got to view that as a friendship, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's just a relationship.
Through the guise of friendship. Yeah.
Yes.
So your 6-month-old child is probably not your closest friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And equally, like it could be a parent, but it may not be both parents, for example. So we're just looking at kind of closeness, basically.
Yeah.
And so in that first layer is 1.5 people. The next layer goes out to 5, and they are what we would say are your intimate friends. So
what's the difference between the 1.5 versus the 5? It's just like literally closeness, like how close you are.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. How strongly connected you feel with them, your sense of attachment, intimacy, all those sorts of things.
So if I've got, let's say Penny is my like intimate friend, I'm like extremely close with mum and dad, as is Josh. Where do they fit then? Like if Penny's that intimate person for me, if I'm just as close to mum and dad, do they then go into the next circle or?
Yeah. So they could, but again, this is not really concrete. So there is obviously some flexibility around that.
Okay, yeah.
But they may move into the next layer.
You are treating this like the MySpace top friends.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, and that's what kind of really, there's such an interesting kind of segue into that really. So we have, this first layer of, the most close person in your life, and then we've got the next layer being around 5, and that's what we call like your intimate friends. And then the next layer moves out to 15, and they are, interestingly, what he would say is best friends.
Whoa,
Ooh, wow.
Okay,
Yeah,
so level
yeah.
3 are best friends.
Yeah. So there's a layer before best friends, which is like intimate friends.
Oh, I've never wanted to plot something more in my life.
I know, God.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to make a table.
So then from 15 it moves into 50,
Yeah.
which are kind of good friends, up to 50.
Okay.
And then from 50 to 150, roughly speaking, are just friends or meaningful contacts.
It still has to be meaningful, not just acquaintances that you work
They're
with.
not acquaintances.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
And the number of 150, obviously it does vary and it depends on a couple of factors. The first one, and this is a pretty obvious one, it depends upon whether there's personality differences. So someone who's introverted, Dunbar suggests that you'd probably have a group of about 100, whereas for people that are extroverted, it would be a group of around 250.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of this is that it moves with age. So as obviously from childhood, we move into gathering greater and greater social networks. And he suggests that we peak at about 250 in like our late teens, early 20s. So through school, perhaps, for some of us into like uni, lots of like, I guess like the era almost of 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're kind of hitting that 250. This is the peak time of how many relationships I'm holding in my life.
It's kind of like that time where it's like you're still seeing people from high school maybe a lot, if you had lots of friends in high school, but you're also making your new adult post-school friends, and there's that combination where worlds are colliding. And
Exactly. And then interestingly, or maybe not interestingly, or maybe not surprisingly, when we start to hit kind of the reproductive kind of period of time, so like around 30, that it then drops off to this kind of very stable point of 150.
Right.
So we kind of tend to drop off the number of friendships and relationships that we maintain when we hit that reproductive period of time.
So the people, because 150, I mean, I guess if I really counted all the people that I knew, I guess maybe I would get up close to that, but I certainly don't see them all regularly. So like how many times do you have to, how regularly do you need to be seeing these people? Like if you haven't seen them in 5 years, but if you saw them, it'd be like you haven't seen them in a day. I guess they'd still be in even if you don't see them regularly.
Yeah, so they can move in and out, obviously. And in like what I thought was really interesting when I was doing the research on Dunbar's research was that he suggests that things like online catch-ups or online communication is really just a band-aid to stop decay of those friendships.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
So it's what he suggests is that what's really required is once every now and then we do have to have some face-to-face contact in order to maintain those relationships.
I remember, this is maybe the wrong time to bring this up, but it just jumped to mind. I remember years ago, someone said to me, like, no, it wasn't someone said to me, I read it somewhere, that they decided to take on this, not philosophy, but kind of idea in life that they would action in their life, which was like no friend left behind. So they thought like, I'm never dropping a friend again. So it meant that because often
very stressed.
Sorry?
It meant they were very stressed.
Yeah, sounds stressful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because that's what I was going to ask, is that because friends obviously come and go into our lives, and if you're friends with someone in high school, then maybe you just naturally stop seeing them. But is it is that a natural thing for friends to exit our lives for whatever reason? Or is that because I might feel guilty if like I stop being in contact with someone who I used to be really close with. But is that a natural thing to happen? It is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many reasons as to why we're not friends necessarily with some people that we may have been very close with like 10 years ago. And so I think in some ways we kind of almost need to normalize, that experience because that kind of can then really move us into kind of feelings of guilt or worry about, how I've treated certain people or why aren't these friends in my life anymore. But it is so natural that those friendships ebb and flow, but also that sometimes, for example, you might have been really close with someone in high school, then you lost contact with them, but then something happens that kind of reinvigorates that friendship. And that person then is kind of back in maybe like a layer of closeness that they haven't been for 10 or 20 years. And that's perfectly normal and okay too.
I find that so interesting that with the MySpace example that obviously that's more about projecting as well, and it feels like quite a dated reference now, MySpace too. But that we're kind of doing it already. We're ranking already in our whether it's conscious or subconsciously, there is a ranking system going on in our heads. And I find that fascinating because I think I feel like I want to reject that notion because it feels unfair to people, but also when I hear it, I'm like, that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also like even kind of zooming out from that, it's also not possible for us to have like to be intimate friends, for example, with 50 people. It's just not, in terms of our resources, it's not a possibility for us to be able to sustain like that level of care, that level of contact with a larger group of peoples, which makes sense then that we have our closest relationships are usually the ones that we speak to and see the most often.
That makes me think like there's no pressure to you don't have to, when you're sort of drifting away from someone or you're not that close anymore and you sort of feel like, well, I think there's friendships, we shouldn't probably not be friends anymore. There's no pressure to like actively like break up with them sort of. It's just like you can have them in your, they can be in your 150. They're just not, they're in the bottom 100 or whatever. Like, well, not bottom 100, but the 100 that you just.
I think that's so spot on. And it's interesting. And I can't remember who actually said this, so I apologise. But
was it Dunbar?
It could have been. Yep. But it's this idea that those friendships that may have been important to you at one stage, but maybe they're still in like your kind of orbit or in your sphere or whatever, those relationships are not dead. They're just kind of asleep. So it's this idea
dormant.
that we can actually rekindle them if we want to. So if there's like a need to in some ways. And I'll get to like why there might be a need to it at another point in time. But I do think it's really important even just to acknowledge that that it's okay that we're not as close with some people when we used to be really close with them.
Yeah. Because then there's the sort of the whole idea that at certain points in our life we kind of face this thing of like, oh, hang on, you can't break up with your friends. Like, and there's a friend, you have a friendship, but if it's so different than a romantic relationship because the rules of society say that if you don't want to be in a relationship with a romantic person anymore, you're allowed to break up with them and then you never have to see them again. Like that's completely, it's painful and hard, but it's very acceptable.
Yeah.
Whereas with a friend, if you decide it's like, I don't want to see this person anymore, you're not allowed to break up. Well, I guess you probably are, but it seems like a strange thing to do.
Harsh.
Yeah.
And that's that's actually a really tricky thing to navigate. And I probably won't go into that because I think that's actually probably a full episode in terms of navigating like how friendships end, particularly if they're not ones that you really want in your life anymore, because there's this whole kind of surging of kind of a ghosting of friendships of sorts. And so I might leave that one for today, but I think we could definitely talk about that at another point because it is, I think, a very common experience for a lot of people, how to navigate the ending of a friendship because it is very different from like a romantic relationship for sure.
I've actually been thinking for a while now. I had a really, really close friend. He was probably like my best friend through school. And when we were about 22, 23, he like consciously made a decision for us to not be friends.
And spoke to you about it?
No, we never spoke about it.
Oh, right.
I see him occasionally. And I have been thinking in the last few months, I would like to ask him if there was something that I did or there was a reason. But then I get too scared. But is that is there a point to doing that? Like, we're not really friends anymore. And you saying our friendship is sleeping makes me think maybe there is a point. Maybe we could. But then I'm like, well, we probably don't have a hell of a lot in common anymore. So is there
Maybe Em might know why he stopped being friends with you.
well, Em knew me back then. Maybe.
Too much time at the cinema. Not enough free tickets.
That's a good question. And I think maybe, to me, the thing that stands out there, Hugh, is probably what is it that bothers you about that? And so, like, the reason as to why he stopped being friends, like, how important is it to you to have the answer?
Oh, that's the good question, isn't it? Oh.
It's probably a bit of ego. Like, there's genuine curiosity as well. And I think about all the stuff. I went through a stage of thinking about it a lot where I think about all the stuff that I did when we were kids that wasn't, like kids. Well, at first I'm like, maybe I'm a bad person because I did that. And then I remember did that and that upset him. And when I did that, I think then I know, like, hang on a minute, I was a kid and he did stuff that upset me. Like, so we've both had, and all friendships probably have those up and downs. But I've been thinking, well, it's like the whole shame thing. I've been thinking, I must be a bad person. Like, so I think maybe it's a combination of curiosity. Like, I'd love to know what I did. But then also, I think a bit of ego. Like, also just how does, like, after 10 years of extremely close, just like felt like overnight, just gone.
Because I would say it's always harder to think about it when it's about you. But if, like, you were asking, if a friend was saying this, if you were telling me this, which you are, I would say I would imagine it's probably more about them than something you actually did. Like the fact that he's changed. I'm assuming it's
I've thought that. I've wondered if that was like, he's like, do you know what? I'm going to be a bit of a different person now, and that is not part of. Yeah. I even have, like, sometimes when I see him, I feel like he's looking at me going, I can't believe I was friends with this guy for that long. Or like, I can't believe he hasn't grown up, or that's what I feel like.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really full on. And I think about it quite a lot, actually. So I'm 100% listening to what you're saying, but I'm thinking about this person the whole time we're talking because I'm just so curious.
It sort of speaks to something that I came to mind when you were talking about the different layers, that it must be very painful when people see each other in different groups. That must be very hard for people.
Do you mean if someone sees themselves? So if
like someone I see a person in the intimate group,
right,
but they only see me in the best or close group, and there's like a disconnection of where they sit. And it, strangely enough, maybe this is not worth bringing up. I'll say it. We'll probably cut this out. And I've got to say this with trying to cover identities as well. This is a tricky one, but.
Is this a story about Bruce Wayne? Because we know he's Batman.
It's actually about Clark Kent.
My friend Bruce is a billionaire. He's out at night. I can't say why.
He doesn't like crime. Not a big fan of crime.
Hates crime.
Yeah. Some people I know, this is to be clear, not my group of friends, but it would be in the outer thing, was telling me about how they weren't invited to an event coming up that they thought they would be invited to, a close event. And in discussing it, I was shocked as well, because I was like, I thought you guys were quite close. And the two of them said, it's just something that guy does, I think, to sort of let you know that you're not that close every now and then. And I was like, God, are we 15 years old? Because these are people around my age. But I was also just kind of shocked. I was shocked that people would do that, but also I was like, what's going on there that someone would want to sort of give signals that no, you're not part of the intimate group. And I thought that's very painful for people who consider themselves to be part of the intimate group and find out they're not in such a aggressive way. And it seems like a thing that would be much more common in younger people, but to know it's still going on for people in their 30s, I thought was quite distressing.
I mean, to be honest, that's actually one of the main reasons that Jam and I, we're not in any hurry to get married and maybe never will, is because the stress of choosing who to invite, couldn't face it, because there's definitely going to be people who aren't invited, and that to me is too much. I cannot, I need, my truth versus harmony there is I need to be in full harmony there. If I see someone who
You're booking out the MCG for your wedding.
yeah, I'd have to be, because I just don't know any other way to do it.
And I think that's really pointing to both our fears of rejection and also the difficulty that we experience in potentially rejecting other people too.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes both ways. Actually, there's just one other thing I might suggest with Dunbar's 150 is a useful exercise actually sometimes can be literally to get a big piece of paper and to map it out yourself. So for you to draw the circles.
I've got just the app for this. I'm very excited.
Well, there's an app.
Well, there's not, but there's this app called Obsidian, which is I'll show you after. You'll love it. It's incredible. It actually makes all the connections to all the people. This is full nerd life now, but yes. Okay, sorry, keep going.
So sometimes it can be useful just to get a sense because often also we can perceive that we actually have less people in our life than we actually do. So sometimes mapping it out can be really helpful to get a sense that actually there are these people that are in my life. And so sometimes that can be a really helpful kind of buffer to our sense of loneliness, our sense of kind of well-being in the world, basically.
And
so
I
that
imagine
might
an
be something.
appreciation for the people in your life as well when you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not to be posted on Instagram though.
No.
Once you've done it very much for your private.
Yeah.
No. So this is Robin Dunbar, and we'll put a link to it, but then people can see how they can map it and if they want to.
And I do want to acknowledge in saying that there, of course, there are going to be people that are listening to this and this feels really uncomfortable, or maybe it kind of moves you into a space of feeling lonely or feeling really sad because perhaps this, brings up concerns that I don't have that many people in my life. And so I really, truly do want to acknowledge that can feel, I think, really hard. But it's also a useful exercise to think about, okay, let me pause for a moment and really think about maybe there are more people in my life than I actually am aware of or that I actually acknowledge as being here. Because I think we really want to move towards more of this noticing the good rather than noticing the deficit. If that makes sense.
That's
The thing that I think about also on this topic is a strange thing that happens when you're in WhatsApp groups and there can be a heap of your really good friends in there and then 2 or 3 people in the group who you're not good friends with, but then you're communicating with them a lot because it's quite an active WhatsApp group. You're is this, I don't really know this person at all, but we're sort of friends through WhatsApp, but not in real life. If I saw them in real life, I'd just go, if I bumped into the footy, I'd just go, hi, and then I wouldn't talk to them at all. Are they in my 150?
I think that's a good question. I'd probably
I'll ask Dunbar.
Yes, you should ask him. They'd obviously be at the outer edge, right? And they can even be obviously I've mentioned, I think in the past, your local barista, they can still be in there too. They don't have to be, or it could be your hairdresser or, people that you have contact with. So we start to kind of unfold or uncover the fact that we do have these networks in our life that are really implicit, but we don't pay enough attention to the fact that they are already here.
Yes, okay.
I feel like the fear in starting that would be a fear of, I'm not going to have many people. But I feel like if I was actually to do it, I would really quickly have such an appreciation for all the different connections I've got with different people, and it would make me appreciate different people in different ways. And it sounds like quite a nice thing to do. Yeah.
And that then kind of leads us into then talking about, okay, so what about adult friendships? What about how we experience friendships now as opposed to being children? And I think particularly, if we're looking at that mapping exercise and it comes up as though, gosh, I really feel like I'm lacking in this part of my life. So I think kind of then having a look at, okay, so why is it different as an adult as opposed to a child? And one of the things that is quite different is that our friendships in adulthood do not occur organically. In childhood, our friendships can appear as though they're more organically grown, and that is primarily because we get repeated interactions.
Sort of forced.
Repeated interactions unplanned interactions too. So things like recess and lunch, yes, there are planned times, but what you do in that time.
Yeah, it's like when you've been wearing the same jacket for 5 years, and then you stop seeing the jacket. You just keep putting it on, and then eventually one day you're like, I don't even like. Why am I wearing this jacket every day? I don't even like this jacket. I should just buy a new one. But it's just become the jacket that you wear.
Mm-hmm.
You might have chosen it at one point, but your tastes have changed a lot since you bought that jacket. Is that a half decent analogy?
Yes.
Great.
Yep. So,
Phew.
I would also like to add to this that Em would not say no if it wasn't.
True.
so you maybe you didn't choose to put the jacket on. And maybe we can say now as adults, we're now choosing deliberately the jacket that we're going to wear.
Yes,
Yep.
that is right for us now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And interestingly, when we look at the research, in terms of adult friendship, if we go into believing that making friends must happen organically, that means that it happens by luck. The people that believe that friendships happen by chance or by luck actually end up lonelier than the people that believe that friendships happen by deliberate action.
Great.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Great.
And so,
package that up. That's a good one.
so what does this actually mean then, like in terms of like the practicality of things? It would be something like signing up to a yoga class as an effort towards making friends, but we don't speak to anyone when we're there because we're waiting for the friendships to come to us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I used to do Pilates and no one spoke. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that
weird.
is a thing. It's
Yeah.
weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that then kind of highlights what's called covert avoidance, and then we have overt avoidance. So starting really kind of basically, overt avoidance would be you choosing not to go to a social outing. Like clearly overt avoidance, no opportunity there to make new friendships.
Yeah.
Okay. But then there's this other like sneaky little kind of safety mechanism that we have as humans, which is called covert avoidance. So you go to the social activities, but you use what we'd say are safety behaviours to stop you from feeling anxious, but they end up prohibiting you from making actual contact with people. And so that would be an example like going to the yoga class and not speaking to anybody.
But so a lot of people find it, as you know, I don't have to tell you this, but a lot of people find it very tough in social situations. And maybe the reason they don't have all the friends that they wish they did is because they lack the confidence or self-esteem to be able to make the connections or to make those deliberate actions. I mean, maybe it's too long of a conversation to talk about like how to do that, like how to make friends as an adult is something that lots of people, I mean, I struggle with it at times, but it is a tough thing to do because it's not organic. School is easier because, the more time you spend with someone, it's like at work as well. If you spend time with someone heaps, you kind of just eventually get closer and closer until you haven't actually had to work that hard to be friends. You just all of a sudden are kind of friends because you just spend so much time together. But in those moments where it's like a yoga class or like a party that you go to and you go with the intention of like, no, this is going to be good. I'll go, I'll meet people and then we'll be friends. But it's very, very hard for some people, extremely difficult to come out of your shell and approach someone that you think might be like you and to talk to them. It's so hard for some people.
It's really hard. And I think, we could actually do a whole episode on social anxiety, but it is something I wanted to talk about also today.
Oh, great.
There's a really great book by Marissa Franco, who's an American psychologist and researcher, called Platonic. It's an excellent book and it's a really useful kind of place to start in terms of looking at friendships. But she kind of brings to light this idea of the paradox of people, which is that we need and want relationships with people, but relationships are also scary. So it's this paradox of approaching people, but being very scared of being harmed by people.
It's a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
I haven't really drunk alcohol much at all really in the last couple of years, maybe even 3 years now. And And I never said, right, I'm stopping drinking. This is just getting out of control. It never was, but I just decided. I didn't even decide. I've just sort of stopped. And one of the reasons when people ask, one of the things I say is, oh, who could be bothered to hang over with kids? It's just awful, which is true. But just on this very topic, just reflecting on this, the only time ever in my life that I worry about what people think about me is when I'm hungover or even slightly hungover. Like if I have 2 or 3 beers, that's it. The next morning I will wake up worrying, what did I say there? What do people think about me for that? And it's an awful feeling. And I do know that alcohol for me is terrible in that regard. And so that's kind of why I stopped drinking.
Wow.
Oh, I think you would definitely not be alone there. I think that's a very common experience. And it kind of really, I don't know the actual biological parts of alcohol withdrawal or the experience of having alcohol, but I certainly know that there are huge increases of post-event rumination. So
that's what it is.
Yeah. So that tendency to ruminate and to think over and over again about what you did the night before. And that leads to so much discomfort, and it also leads to kind of probably changes too in our expectations or intentions when we go then into the next social interaction. So we're kind of bringing into the next social interaction already like a negative, like potentially like a fear of rejection or a negative expectation of how that will go based upon my experience the previous time when I was drinking.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, there's so much research on social anxiety and how we relate interpersonally, but there's a few kind of interesting factors I think that we could mention here. One of them is called the liking gap, and that is this idea that when we go into interactions, particularly with new friends or with new acquaintances, that we will perceive that people like us less than they actually do.
Yep.
So we predict that they won't like us, and so we go in thinking that they won't like us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Very familiar.
Yes.
Very familiar feeling.
Yeah. So we go in with this prediction that they're not going to like me, and that then often really serves a reinforcing kind of behaviour of withdrawal or
which is kind of inherently unlikable as well. Like you sort of project behaviour that is not desirable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I've spoken a little bit about this in terms of rejection sensitivity, that we're kind of primed to look for cues of rejection. We then change our behaviour. It's our changing behaviour that actually then causes rejection. So that's definitely a play. But the main point that Marissa Franco makes is that we actually have to assume people like us. So we need to go into these interactions assuming people will like us, because that changes how we relate with them.
As opposed to assuming people will like us, could you also assume that people are also looking for new connections like we are?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because because the assuming that you'd like us, assuming people would like me is like, it's almost like I feel like I'm setting myself up for a fall. Because if I'm assuming someone's going to like me and they don't dislike me, but they just don't show any interest, then I'm going to assume that, I was wrong. I shouldn't have assumed that they liked me. I mean, I'm not questioning the research. Obviously, they know more than me, but
that's too big a statement for you.
Sometimes, depending on the person.
Yeah.
But I think what does help me is I assume that people have the best intentions, and I assume people want to meet people. And even at that level, that makes it easier for me, I think. Yeah.
I have genuinely always, I'm thinking a lot about that just then. I've genuinely always had a thing in my head when I'm meeting new people, which now saying it makes me feel like I might be weird, but I always think, I can't wait for us to really like each other. That's what I always think.
Yeah.
With all people, I just think, we're going to like each other. It's going to be so exciting.
Wow, really?
That's what I always think.
That's amazing.
And then if it doesn't quite click, I don't even really think about it. I just go, where's someone else that we could really like each other?
Even if it's someone who, maybe perceivably has like more status or more friends or more,
You are the perfect example. When I met you, when we met and we had our first ever catch up, I was just so excited to like each other so much.
Really?
Yeah. A bit weird because you also had a profile and we had a persona that I knew of, and I was very confident that Yeah, I much remember thinking, I cannot wait for us to really like each other.
I didn't like you for years.
Still working that one out.
We're almost there.
That's good.
That's
But that's
amazing.
always how I felt
Wow,
about
hey.
people.
Yeah, wow.
And that's really interesting too, kind of like how that impacts how you actually do make those
Well,
connections.
I'm guessing it's probably a positive.
Hugely
it makes
helpful.
so
Yeah.
much sense
Yeah.
because you come into a conversation with all this like positivity and like it's not necessarily confidence in a bad way. It's just like you believe you should be there meeting that person. You believe you can tell.
I just think we should both be liking each other.
Well, yeah, but it's like you believe inherently that you should be there with that person, whereas often I don't believe I have like I shouldn't be there. Like I don't believe that I belong in this
Right. Okay.
in this situation with certain people. Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow, that you would have that much confidence with me? Me? Oh God! Wow.
But I also remember when you two first met, and I just couldn't. Well, even before you met, I couldn't wait. I just like I can't wait for how much
Me
these
and
are gonna,
Josh.
Yeah. Sorry. So I can't wait for how much these guys are going to love each other.
Yeah, so yeah, and I had not the opposite, but I it's not as dire, but I was like, wouldn't have assumed that you would like me.
Right.
Yeah, not that you would think I was bad or anything, but I wouldn't make the assumption that Ryan would like me.
I just say, I mean, that to me, I've thought the exact opposite thing. I can't wait for how much these guys are going to love each
fascinating.
other. Like it's just such a. Of course you would.
But I relate more to Josh's approach than to yours.
Yeah, yeah. It's not dislike for me; it's more just disinterest. But like,
Yep.
I don't really need like he's all right, but I don't need another. I don't need that person in my life, sort of thing.
And I'm just
Yeah.
curious, for both you, Josh and Ryan, what difference do you think it would make if you kind of walked into a situation, just hypothetically, believing that someone will like you? So, and I really want to differentiate that from kind of an arrogance, because we're not talking about arrogantly walking in there thinking I'm better than.
Yeah, I just to be clear, I definitely don't think that. I've never once thought, oh, this is like this person's lucky day.
Yeah, yeah.
I never once think that. I just think I can't wait for us to meet and be, yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that came across quite clearly.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
No, you don't think you're arrogant. But, what difference would that make, do you think, if there was like an assumption?
I can sort of speak to it a bit because I think I've changed a bit over the last 5 years in this area for many reasons, and I feel like now I'm closer to the point of like not so much of just sort of, well, why wouldn't they like me? I'm not bad. I'm not like I'm not perfect, but I'm also not a bad person. So, and they're not a bad person either. So why wouldn't they like me? Sort of thing. We might not become best friends, but I doubt they're going to walk away from me going, geez, that was a tough 20 minutes talking to him. And it's allowed me to be myself more in situations where previously I would have frozen or projected character traits of myself that I don't really like very much through overcompensating or trying to do different things. It's just allowed me to relax into myself and be, weirdly, having said what I just said, also being okay if someone doesn't like me. Of being like, well, I kind of don't care as well if they don't like me, which is a place that I probably wasn't at earlier in life, but for, I think, a million different little reasons and some bigger ones. I think I'm just more okay with, maybe I'm trying to join too much together here, but I think I'm feeling really good about the 15, maybe, that top 15 in that thing.
Yeah.
I think because I'm feeling really good about that has a lot to do with it as well. That I feel like I've got a great circles. So it doesn't feel like I need someone in there. So I'm like, well, if this goes well, that's lovely. But if it doesn't, then
You're going to have to kick someone out.
yeah, it's a
One in, one
problem.
out.
It's a real problem if this goes well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think that's really key too in terms of even looking at those circles, is that that theory doesn't actually speak to the quality of those relationships inside those circles. But what I'm hearing you say is that the quality of those relationships for you feel really fulfilling and satisfying and important.
Yeah, and different too.
Yeah.
Like there feels like I get different interactions and different friendships within that sort of 15 that fulfill very different parts of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which thanks friends. I love you all. I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
Yeah. There's one other part here that I wanted to mention too that's, really related to this assumption of liking or disliking. And it features so often in our experience of social anxiety, which is called the spotlight effect. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that.
No.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Care to elaborate?
Continue.
Wow.
But no,
Said from his throne, yes. Pass me my goblet of wine.
And come and like me.
Yes, Em, I know it. Continue.
well, I've just realised that I don't because no, hear me out. Because Johann Hari talks about the spotlight effect as far as focus is concerned, and I'm wondering if it's related to that.
Well, it probably is, but it's basically this idea that when we feel anxious, we assume everyone is looking at us, and we also assume that people are paying attention to all of our mistakes. We assume that people are thinking about all our social mistakes after the event. And we assume basically that we are so much more on the minds of other people than we actually are.
Okay, so first of all, I didn't know what the spotlight effect was at all. That was very different to what I was thinking, but that is so relatable.
So I mean, how do people not do that? Like, I mean, like that would be so common.
Yeah.
Like,
Let's not explore any further. Just how do you not do it?
How do you not do that?
Well, I think, first of all, just even talking about this now is like highlighting the fact that, we like even just thinking about for yourself, how often do you go and think about the other person's behaviors during your interaction? Like,
Yeah, no,
never.
Yeah.
Unless
I
it's
mean,
something
yeah.
crazy. Like usually we become so much more introspective and so much more focused on the social errors we have made.
Isn't that funny that like in that interaction, I might be thinking, oh, everyone's noticing me, but everyone else is just noticing themselves.
Exactly.
Because everyone's looking in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I think just sort of a little bit to what you were asking Josh before, and how it would be different if I approached a situation without worrying about people not liking me or being disinterested in me. I think this is sort of to do with the spotlight effect as well, is that if I go into a situation with someone and I'm worried that they're either not going to like me or I really want them to like me, which is, I guess, based on the assumption that they won't immediately like me and I need to like work for their approval in some way, which could be true in some situations. I feel like in those situations, I hyper-focus on or put a spotlight on needing to be impressive or funny. And then when I'm doing that, I'm often just not being myself. And then what the spotlight effect then turns to afterwards, I'm always like disappointed with myself because I've like tried too hard, or I've tried to make too many jokes, or I don't know, I just wasn't myself and I was trying to be someone that I thought they would want me to be. And then I will think about that to my detriment for ages afterwards and think, God, I was just, it won't take over my thoughts and I don't obsess over it like I know some people do. But that's how I think it would be different for me if I didn't do it. I would just be myself and I would just leave it up to the gods whether they'll like me or not. Some will, some won't. But I'm always disappointed in myself when I am not myself in those environments.
Can I ask you a question about that? When you're
Prefer if you didn't.
Okay, no worries. We'll move on.
Go ahead.
When you're doing that, obsessing about your behaviour, do you assume that the other person's doing it as well about your behaviour? Do you think they've walked away going, God, he was trying so hard? He was
sometimes for sure, for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of instances I can think of, and it's usually with people who I think it's such a strange word, but who I think are cooler than me. Or who I think are more successful than me, or who are more successful than me in some ways. And it's those people, I guess it's like a status thing, who are higher than me on the perceived status ladder, that I feel like I need to work harder to gain their approval.
I watched you meeting someone who I know you definitely perceive to be one of the most successful people in Australia, in Joe Brum. When he joined us for our live show.
He's the creator of Bluey.
The creator of Bluey. And you were I remember thinking, gosh, you're so yourself right now. Like you are showing him who Ryan Shelton is.
Mm.
And I thought I thought you were great. I didn't see any,
I
because
reckon-
he is, first of all, he's very cool.
Well, yeah,
and
but
he's so successful.
I know, but I think in that particular example, I think I was able to be like that because he is just so relaxed.
Oh, yeah.
I felt the same thing too. I was so kind of like scared to meet him because I wanted to be myself.
Mm.
But I think it speaks to what an incredible person he is, that he was so unassuming, so charming, relaxed and kind, and just sort of himself and not trying to be anything else. It kind of suddenly I was like, oh, well, if you're going to be yourself, I can be myself.
Well, you never get the sense that if we didn't know he was the creator of Bluey, I bet he would never tell us.
No, he's definitely wearing Bluey paraphernalia.
Like he's not, there's not that kind of energy where it's like he's not walking around like he's someone important.
Yeah.
And I think that probably contributed to it. When I met him and I was like, oh, you're just a guy who's done an incredible thing, but it allowed me to kind of just relax.
Yeah.
Whereas if he had which often happens at events like especially at like the comedy festival and stuff, when you're surrounded by all these different comedians and it can get very competitive, people trying to kind of out-joke each other, and that's where you feel the need to get noticed with someone like him, I think that probably helps me just be myself because he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that also kind of speaks to what our expectations are about how we make a friend in terms of who wants to be our friend. So I think, often there can be this kind of perception that we have to be the cool person, the person that's the smartest, the person that's the funniest, that those are the things that will make me likable. But interestingly, again, like the research suggests, it's actually completely the opposite to that. And there's this phenomenon that was developed by some researchers in Germany, Anna Bruck and her colleagues, and she termed the phenomenon the beautiful mess effect. And what her colleagues were finding, and this is really off the back too of Brené Brown's research, is that it's not how cool you are, it's not how clever or how funny you are, but it's actually how you make other people feel that determines kind of likability or friendship development.
It's the best.
That's a winner.
That's so good.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, make that the promo for this year, for this season. That is huge.
Yeah.
That's what, I mean, we probably all know that deep down, but a reminder that the way we make people feel is what determines how likely they want to be friends with us.
And this really just ties in so much, I think, to the Imperfects too, and that is that the way in which we often show people that they matter, the way that we show people that we care for them or are interested in them, is actually through vulnerability and disclosures to another person that there has been a struggle for me, or that this has been something difficult that's happened in my life, because it indicates that we are showing kind of a trusting tone towards them. We're showing that we believe they can hold that information. So it's actually the acts of vulnerability in the development of friendships that really determine how likely it is that those relationships will turn into friendships.
And vice versa, that it sounds like projecting those things before of like trying to be the smartest or the funniest or the coolest is like that's like the polar opposite of vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also when you think about this, I don't know if you've ever come across, meeting people that seem to have everything together, that like this kind of perfectionistic kind of stance, or, like they're good at everything. There's no kind of experience of difficulty in their lives. And I just kind of like, even just reflecting on this, how easy does it feel to have intimate relationships with them?
No, it feels like there's a wall up or something. Yeah.
Because there's actually there are things going wrong, but if they're not letting you in, you feel like, well, they don't trust me or something.
Yeah,
that might be what
and
it
even
is.
if you don't know them intimately, you don't know if you just met them and they seem perfect, it's just, you don't. I guess it can seem like intimidating in the moment, but if you think about it deeply, as we now know, it's like, well, of course they've got stuff going on, and so that's probably, and not that they need to like reveal, not that you need to kind of like reveal all your imperfections when you first meet someone, but it is just, it's like a nod to the fact that I'm not perfect, or it's like the suggestion.
Yeah. Why is that though? Like, because we, as you said, we intellectually now know it from doing this show that no, and there was certainly a hunch that no one's perfect. But why is it that being just in the presence of someone who appears to be perfect, you feel like you can't get an in?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nowhere for me to latch onto here to be friends.
There's also, it makes me think of social media, and it makes me think of the persona that people play through their Instagram or whatever, and it's like I think maybe there's the belief that the more there's like a confusion between being liked and being admired. And it's like to admire, like I admire that person. It's like, oh, look at that person. Look at all the cars they've got, and look at how beautiful they are, and blah blah blah. And you admire them, but do I like them, and would I want to be friends with them? Like there are people who I've seen on Instagram, and that people like follow on Instagram and say that like I love that person. But it's like, do you really love that person, or do you just think you just admire parts of them? Does that? Am I hitting anything there?
I think I look at those, like if I've met someone who looks perfect, I have this with, like I haven't never ever consciously thought it before, but just now thinking about it, I feel like I'm looking at them going, where's the fun? Like how can we have fun? Like what are we going to have fun with here? Because everything's so like glistening and polished, and like what's our mess? Like where's it? How are we going to have fun with this?
We're looking for connection, and that perfectionistic facade does not really kind of allow us to really connect.
Yeah, it's like a barrier
beyond status or beyond kind of appearance or material possessions. Like we're really kind of wanting to get like to the heart of this experience of being like, this is going to sound a bit weird, but like there are these two nervous systems in play here together, and when one nervous system is engaged and open and interested and the other one is not, like your nervous system picks that up very quickly. So then we can then we withdraw. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yep. And I reckon there's a you almost sort of want to bond over struggles. Like Penny and I and our family have been through something that we chatted to another family in who are over in the States, like they live overseas, and it turns out we had a similar like we were sort of friends with them before. It turns out we have a very similar struggle. Instantly we just become so close to them. Like we just shared the same struggle, and we're both very open about it, and bang, it was like I think there's something about when you see someone else who's gone through what you've gone through, there's a huge love and respect and connection and bond that happens very quickly. And I guess if you see something or someone who is perfect, I don't think anyone walks around feeling perfect. So there's like, well, we don't have the same struggles. So
it's repelling. Yeah. I think that's really spot on too, just speaking to like, you know, again, we speak about this so often, but like, you know, this real power of vulnerability, because it's in those moments where we're having this kind of this sharing of difficulty, of struggle, that we do feel so much more connected with other people. And when we think about kind of, you know, how relationships develop, so like if you were to meet a new person today, like obviously it would probably be a little bit maybe kind of dangerous or a bit unwise to go and suddenly disclose all of your difficulties to this person over time, like that you've just met. But if we look at it, okay, so if this person is someone that maybe like, I think I kind of like quite like them, like they sound quite interesting. If we look at how we can develop that particular interaction into like an actual close friend or even a good friend, is that this repeated interaction with that person that we increase our vulnerability with. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes. I mean, it kind of, I reckon like a big part of like the reason why Hugh and I hit it off so quickly.
I was about to jump in and say love each other, but yeah, hit it off definitely.
Loved each other so quickly, because we didn't, when we first met up, when I first reached out to Hugh to catch up with him, it was for a very specific purpose, and that was for me to share my imperfections, the things that I was going through in that moment. And my instinct was that Hugh would be a compassionate ear, like a sympathetic ear, that he would. I didn't know him that well, but I knew he was doing the work he was doing with the Resilience Project. So I was like, okay, well, even though I've got good friends, he not only are you doing the Resilience Project, but you just sort of like put out an energy which felt like it's a safe place to talk to him. And so maybe because we were talking about that stuff from the first time we met, it probably like fast tracked our relationship. Whereas if we had have met, I don't know, in the bloody cricket nets or something, it might have taken us years to get to that point. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not, but maybe that's part of it.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. And even if you think like, I don't know if you guys have had this experience where you've gone traveling and you make friendships or like connections really quickly, and there's something interesting about this kind of transitory experience. You know, when you're traveling, is that often what happens is we end up disclosing things about ourselves quite quickly, and so then you have these really intense kind of relationships with people when you're traveling. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, because you can you know there's an out. Like there's no pressure that's like, oh God, if I start this now, then I'm in forever. Like there's like a very specific built-in boundary to that mini friendship, which is like, well, we're going to hang out for a couple of days, so let's just throw it all at the wall, and if it works, then we can stay in touch. If not, I can never see this person again. It's kind of like Uber drivers. Like sometimes I have like this really like intense relationship with an Uber driver, and I'm just like, well, I'm not going to see you again in 15 minutes. Anyway.
I was going to wonder if that comes also from uncertainty, in that when you're traveling, presuming that, I'm just thinking about some like fast friendships that I've made that we're sort of still connected through Instagram or something, but don't really talk, but have very fond memories of the friendships that were made. I'm thinking about a couple in particular. Sophie and I met when we were going to Gallipoli on a bus overnight and chatted to this couple. Is it also to do with the fact that you're both in a vulnerable situation when you meet, and that there's an uncertainty about where you're going and unfamiliar and it's not familiar? So
and you're also by yourself.
You're kind of meeting, it's vulnerable in its creation.
It's like
shared
two fish out of water.
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What do they do to fish out of water?
So, you know, if you're a fish out of water. You ever heard that phrase?
What do they do?
I'm so confused.
So, because you genuinely don't know the phrase fish out of water.
No, I know that.
Oh, so what I'm saying is, like, if there's two fish who are out of water together, they can bond over the fact they're both out of water.
I thought it was like a phenomenon that I wasn't aware of. If two fish are out of water, they like find each other and they like help each other get back into water.
Yeah. Oh my God, another fish. Great. Have you got Google Maps? My phone's not working. I haven't got data.
That's really cool. I was like, what an amazing thing. I'd never heard of. Two fish will...
A fish wandering around Rome. Oh God, I don't know what to do. That fish will know. It's so good to see another fish out of water.
Sorry, apologies. I understand.
Something on vulnerability of friendships. And it speaks to, I think, a phenomenon in this that may be particular to this show, but the vulnerability, and when you get really deep, I find can be quite addictive. And then there's like a feeling like, oh, now I've got to trump that vulnerability, and that.
Or trump their vulnerability or your previous vulnerability?
Just the experience of, because when you have a really good vulnerable conversation with someone, I find that to be an incredibly rewarding experience. But then I feel like it's easy to fall into the trap of like, well, I need to have that kind of level of vulnerability for it to be a real friendship. But I feel like some of the best friendships I've gotten, or people at least that I'm attracted to when I meet them, are people that are willing to show really small vulnerabilities. Like, for some reason, an example that's coming to mind is actually when me and Andy, who films this podcast, when we're on a shoot together, and he has one wheel, which is like this skateboard thing, and we're all trying to use it, and none of us had used it before. And I really enjoyed just seeing people who are willing to fail at something for the first time and laughing about that, and the shared experience of just something silly, of being willing to show that I don't know how to do this, and I'm so bad on that kind of thing. So I was sort of doing the same thing, and I found that to be really bonding. And I felt it worth mentioning, just so people don't feel the pressure that friendships have to begin. And you sort of said this before, but don't have to begin with when I was young, I had this happen to me, or like these really big, deep things. It's just the shared experience of something silly that's slightly vulnerable.
I think you're really spot on there. And I think that is a really kind of important point to make too, is that we really don't want to go out there and suddenly just disclose all our biggest things to random people. I think that that obviously that feels really important.
Yeah.
And I also kind of want to mention, like, on that note, that there are we can also have different functions of friendships too. So, they may not be our closest friends, but there are different kind of qualities to certain friendships that are really important to our sense of well-being and particularly to manage feelings of loneliness. William Rawlins, who's a researcher in America, I think, defines the expectations of friendships in terms of 3 kind of major things, and they don't have to be within the one person. So we expect from a friend that we can find someone to talk to. So it's kind of fairly basic. And this is where that kind of vulnerability stuff shows up, that we can find someone that we can have vulnerable, important, meaningful conversations with. The other kind is someone to rely on. And so someone to rely on is the person that you call to pick you up from the airport, the person that will come around to your house if you've locked your car, keys in the car, the person that is kind of dependable. But they may not be the person that you have the really vulnerable conversations with, right?
But it doesn't make them not your friend.
Exactly.
Jeez,
Yeah.
They're
That's
impressive
such a
friends,
great
those
point.
people.
Yeah.
Who are yours for that?
Name them.
Yeah, who are you?
Oh, God. I don't think that's appropriate.
Oh, okay, don't worry. No, I'm just so interested in that person in everyone's life. No, it's probably fair enough.
And then there's a third expectation or function, which is someone to enjoy, or in other words, someone to have fun with. And so, at any one time, if we've got a friend that can meet, or we've got friends that meet those things, those expectations, then generally speaking, we might have a greater sense of well-being, a greater sense of connection, of not feeling lonely. Whereas, I'm just kind of thinking about examples where, you might have someone that you rely on, you might have someone that you can talk to, but maybe you don't have access to friends that kind of bring the fun. And there can be a real sense of deficit there, a real kind of lacking and a yearning for something more.
Would it be, it feels like it would be highly likely that the people who are the trifecta, that have all 3 of those traits, qualities, are probably more likely to be higher in the 150 because they're probably people that you're drawn to more, because if you want fun or if you want someone you can rely on, someone to talk to. It makes me think it's another, for people playing at home, creating the chart. You could color code each person, because then you can also look at the chart and go okay, I need to talk to someone. Yep, I'll choose Mike. Mike has all 3, or Mike's going to be fun, or Mike's, like that. Because there's not many people I can think of that have all of those things. I can think of people, but they're not
rare.
many.
Yeah.
And we do need to kind of manage our expectations of friendships that they don't have to have those 3 things. In fact, they can just have one of them, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And it really kind of undermines, I think, this kind of idea of almost like the Hollywood view of friendship, that that there is this one person or this maybe 2 or 3 people that meet all of those needs.
Well, it's kind of like the, I can't think of a better example, but the Sex and the City foursome. And it's each of the characters, the 4 women in Sex and the City, they kind of each represent, often in TV shows and films, I guess, even though you said let's not do the Hollywood example, but they kind of each, to carry all the other 3, she would turn to a different one for a different scenario. And I guess between the 4 of them, when she's got the 3 of them there, she has all 3 ticked off. But each one of them probably, none of those other 3 tick all of the boxes, probably intentionally.
You know what it made me think? It made me think of terrible memes that you see about what a friend is and what a friend should be. And that if you read them and then think about a friend and they don't do that, you automatically think, well, they're not a real friend. But it's I just love what you've said so much, because it's a reminder that you don't have to get everything from, your friend doesn't have to be able to do everything. And there's real value in having friends who provide different things.
Absolutely.
Don't expect
Yeah.
your fun friend to listen to you talk about what
And
you're
pick
going
you up
through at
from
the
the airport
moment.
when you're in a city.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Awesome.
And it also really speaks to, and this is kind of maybe just the last, there's so many more things I want to talk about, but I'm wary of our time. Just kind of really speaks to the last aspect of this, which is how important friendships are when you're in a romantic relationship.
Oh, yeah.
So again, like the research is unequivocal when it comes to this, that basically if you have friends, that buffers the impact of any kind of difficulty that you have in your romantic relationship. If we have all of our eggs in one basket, so if we place all of our emotional needs, our physical needs, our needs for affection on our romantic partner, we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble.
That's funny because that's often when people meet someone, the first, and it's really intense in the start of the relationship, friends can drop off pretty quick. Like really fast. Yep. And so it's a really nice thing to be consciously aware of, that like maintaining your friendships, your close relationships, as long as as well as your romantic relationship.
Oh, it's so pivotal. And I guess I was talking to my husband about this, and I was like, just really encouraging. Like, we should just be seeing our friends like all the time, a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, and I often say this to him, that like how, kind of proud I am of how he maintains his friendships, and I would never be discouraging of him seeing his friends because it like ultimately makes us happier.
Yeah.
That if you're getting these needs fulfilled in a way that I can't possibly, that's only going to kind of bring a greater sense of well-being into our relationship as well.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really good. Like two fish out of water.
just so you know, Hugh, the saying doesn't work for every situation.
That is awesome. That's really great.
And this may have been inherent, that your romantic partner doesn't have to fulfill all those three either. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also like looking at our expectations there, if we hold an expectation that our romantic partner is going to fulfill all our needs, it will only lead to us feeling really disappointed, resentful, angry, and then can really change how we relate with our romantic partner.
Yeah, because there's that cliche that a lot of people say, and you hear it a lot at weddings, that my wife or husband is my best friend. And it's a lovely sentiment, but I think in it is built in the idea that they fulfill all three of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
I got to say, like when you said, Em, that you were going to talk about friendship, to be honest, part of me was like, friendship, is there much in friendship? I guess it's like you have friends, you don't have friends sometimes, you do have friends, but that is all so incredible. It's so helpful to me.
I'll tell you what I did think about as well during this whole conversation, understanding it's coming to an end now, but I really couldn't help but think about our podcast team. Like we've got, like we're all becoming closer and closer and closer. We've travelled a lot this year with the live show. And it's I would say it's been one of the highlights for me is the sense of friendship and closeness with all of us. Like it's really
definitely.
Like even there was one night when we did a show in Sydney and a shocking night's sleep the night before, and we had a big day of tech rehearsals during the day, and I was just so exhausted and so flat. And I did this breathing exercise meditation thing, and it was like they're asking questions around what's most special about it's like it was designed to get you up for something, like to try and pump you up a bit. And it said focus on what's most special about what you're about to do. And I was literally sitting there and I was thinking, I'm doing this with Ryan, Josh, and Bridget, like people that I love so much. That's what and it was friendship that got me into a headspace of like, I can't wait to do this now. I was so flat and thinking about friendship. That's what it was. That's what got me to a place where I went from being flat to just so energized. That's the end of that point.
Oh, I think that's beautiful though, and just really speaks again, like almost like coming full circle. I don't think we can underestimate the power of friendship.
No, clearly not.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Wow. I want to make that chart.
And then share it.
Chuck it on Instagram.
Yeah.
See if you made it or not. See what level you are. Wow. Okay, well, Em, thank you.
Brilliant.
Oh, pleasure.
Brilliant episode. I love that you've thought of it as a topic, and then the work you put into it as well is just
Yeah.
wonderful, and we'll all
thank
benefit
you.
from it. Thank you.
Well, I might come back and talk about social anxiety another time.
Oh, yeah.
I think so. I
Pretty related.
think that would be good.
We'll also talk about romantic relationships one day as well as a topic.
Yes.
I think that'd be like, just as you said, just right at the end, and when you said like, I was thinking, gosh, there'd be a lot of people who'd love to hear more about that, your thoughts on that. So, anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we also
Thanks for
cover
having me.
every single thing about life at some point. That'd be great. We're going to tick off everything in life.
I'll
Cheers.
be here for a long time.
We've got many apps to do.
We do. Thank you, Em.
Thanks.
Thanks, Em.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
The Imperfects is hosted and produced by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, Ryan Shelton, and Josh Van Cuylenberg. Our executive producer is Bridget Northeast. This episode was filmed by Andy Poole and edited by Jamison Moore.